I'm going to start with Dan, our new friend, because he's a Democrat, and I would love to get your reaction to kick it off to what we just saw.
JD Vance did absolutely terrific tonight. And I say that not to filibuster, but because, he was comfortable, he was confident, he was in command. And in comparison, I thought Tim Walz looked a little overwhelmed. He looked, frankly, a little small and simple. Democrats always have talked about for the last 2 years what would happen if they ran against somebody who didn't have Trump's kind of personal baggage, his conduct issues. And I think you saw it tonight. JD Vance just really prosecuted the case about, why haven't you done it? You talk a great game, but again, why haven't you done it? I think the best thing, as you were talking about with your previous guest, I'm not sure ultimately people make their decision based on the vice president. I think where Vance might have fallen a little short is one of the goals of the Trump campaign is to paint Harris and Walz as dangerously liberal. And I don't really think they did that. They just focused on, you haven't done the things that you're proposing now. But that's about it. I think, a charitable thing that one could say about their performance tonight.
Fair point on that last issue. I think they too also that they should have done that, and we didn't hear a lot of that tonight. They're doing it more in their ads and so on. Mark, what'd you think?
4 quick points. First, I don't think it fundamentally changes the race on the margins. I think Vance becomes a much more valuable surrogate now, because I think it's going to be harder for the press to mock him. I think Republicans will be really enthusiastic to greet him on the campaign trail in those Rust Belt states. And that helps because, he's the main surrogate. And they sort of flipped it right now. He's the policy guy and Trump is the attack dog. Number 2, I think it positions Vance to be a very big part of the Republican Party in the future. He demonstrated how to speak MAGA to the suburbs, and that's what Donald Trump can do on occasion. But Vance did a master class on it tonight. On the Walz side, I think he's lucky that he was bailed out by the moderators, because what was a mismatch would have been a massacre had it been a level playing field. His performance was shaky at best. He had a few good moments, but I really do think they dodged a bullet. And as you see from tweets from Claire McCaskill, you read from David Axelrod, the Democrats are clearly trying to play this down. Finally, and it gives me no pleasure to say this, I just don't understand how a news organization that watched the disastrous and surreal performance by ABC could engage in a moderation of a debate that's supposed to be fair to both sides in such an unequal way. It was shocking to me that once again we saw an uneven performance by them, just not even close in the subjects that were chosen, in who they chose to fact check, in who they gave time to, and how they framed rebuttals. It's just stunning to me that in this day and age, after we've seen what the reputation of the so-called mainstream media is like, that CBS could have put together such a performance.
Mark, the mic cut moment when JD Vance, a debate was unfolding. They were actually starting to go at it. It was interesting, and it's on one of the most important issues in the country. And those CBS producers cut his mic. It was malpractice. It really was.
Yeah, I mean, that's one moment, but the whole thing, I mean, just look at the subjects that they chose. And as Sean pointed out, what they left out. I mean, I don't understand it on the one hand. On the other hand, as I said after the first debate, if you go to a Chinese restaurant, you can expect to be served Chinese food. And the Republicans agreed to do a debate on CBS. They obviously had to expect some of that. But I am as someone who studied liberal media bias my whole career and worked in newsrooms like that, I just can't believe that that's what they think is the way to serve all the American people, with the responsibility, the solemn responsibility they have to be the moderators of a presidential debate. I just breathless at thinking about what they did.
The other piece of it too, Sean, is that I can tell you, having moderated these, some warmth would be nice. You don't have to go out there like it's a proctology exam. You can genuinely smile and say, I'm sorry, I know. All right. And you can say, I will let you guys finish this exchange. And then after this, I have to move on. You don't have to be so stiff and unlikable. And look, I don't mean to be personal, but Margaret Brennan's makeup looked very severe. She looked very pasty. I meant it when I said she needed a little bit of bronzer. She needed to warm up in a couple of different ways. And I don't think they did her any favors because she came across as very cold and unlikable. And you're not supposed to lose the debate as the moderator, right? Anyway, Sean, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, I agree. I mean, I wish I could say I was shocked. I do honestly believe, though, that they felt like they had a mission, which is we need to stop Donald Trump. And this was our last potential effort. So they understood the mission at hand. ABC, they got their mission. They tried to inject themselves. And I get Mark's point, and I agree with him 100%, except I think the media has recognized after 2016 that they have a bigger role to play. They believe fundamentally that they have to do everything they can to stop the resurgence of Donald Trump and the return to the White House. I mean, the topics were unbelievable. It literally was like, we don't need to give you the questions. Don't worry, we got you this time. We're going to cover all of the key things. But to your point, Megyn, they let that debate go on at the end. When it came to abortion, it was like, hey, we'll let you guys go at it because we thought that you were going to have no problem with this. On childcare, they let the debate go on when they thought it would benefit Walz. They cut JD off when it didn't, when they didn't think it was going to benefit him. The bottom line, though, is JD did a couple things that were masterful. One, he constantly reminded people about the top of the ticket. It wasn't about him, his record. He did inject a little bit about Tim Walz, but he made sure that he reminded people they're voting on a president. And he kept going back to Kamala Harris, her record, her time in office. And he also went back to the record and results of Donald Trump over and over again. And that's where I think this is the fundamental existential question right now. This is Donald Trump. He has a record. He has results. If you like it, you know what you're getting. This is Kamala Harris and the last 3.5 years of her. You know, she can't give you any more excuses. JD kept pivoting back to that over and over again. The problem that Walz had fundamentally is Kamala Harris won't tell us where she is on a position. I mean, she hides from the press. She won't tell us why she flip-flops on these issues. So how do you expect Tim Walz, who frankly is handicapped from doing a good job to begin with because he wasn't a good debater, to articulate somebody else's positions that he doesn't know, she doesn't know? And that was fundamentally apparent tonight. He couldn't articulate her position because she doesn't know what it is.
Yeah, that is a tough one. I mean, what did you make, Dan, of the moment where I'm going to guess that the debate prep folks around Tim Walz did not tell him the headline out of tonight's debate should be you with the caption under it, I am a knucklehead.
I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, look, this is something that if the Harris ticket loses is going to be, picked apart now for a long time, which is just like the top of the ticket. Tim Walz was picked partly because he was such an effective communicator this summer, making the case against Trump Vance. But ever since he was selected, like Harris, he has done very few interviews, very few press conferences. And so he looked rusty up there tonight, right? I mean, normally you would explain these things, a month ago, you would have been asked, 20 times now, and it would be old news a little bit. And I know this latest attack on about whether he was in China at the time is new, but all these things have built up. And so going into tonight, everyone wanted to know, how is he going to deal with both defending his own record, his own personal history, Harris's record, and the evolution of that record, because we haven't heard from him. And that answer, it's not as bad as Dan Quayle against Lloyd Benson. And I said to someone earlier, thank God it took him 2 minutes to wrap himself in a pretzel. Because if he did it in 10 seconds, it would be on the internet for the rest of our lives.
They'll be dicing it down to 10 seconds. I'm sure they already have.
By the way,
can I just go ahead, Sean.
The Tiananmen Square answer, I think, look, the knucklehead answer was I'm so glad he said it. But the reality is that you were either there or you're not, right? And we see this continued pattern with him. He lied about IVF. He lied about his record in the military, both in terms of the use of Command Sergeant Major, then the weapons of war. He lied about receiving an award from a Nebraska Chamber of Commerce. The guy has a pattern of lying about it. And then we get asked tonight very simply, were you there or not? It's not like you're like, you know what? I forgot I was in a Target parking lot in Edina, Minnesota. You either were in Tiananmen Square or you weren't. And the idea that he couldn't answer that question, I mean, no one says to yourself, you're right. It wasn't Tiananmen Square. It was outside the Dwayne Reed. It doesn't. I mean,
I thought it was an Iwo Jima, but it was just a movie about it.
And look at how well JD Vance on a couple of occasions said, I misspoke. Like he just owned it and pivoted right off of it. I mean, it was a masterclass in how to get out of it, whereas Tim Walz was just, twisting himself.
But then, to add credibility to Tim Walz's own argument, he either intentionally misspoke on the debate stage tonight, or he told the truth. Either way, this is not a good answer. SOT 15 on the subject of school shootings.
Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it's only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it.
Wait, what? Right? Yeah. What? I don't know if he meant that.
School shooting victims.
Go ahead, Mark.
He meant school shooting victims. So. I just want to go back to the China answer. I'd love to know how they rehearsed it, because I'm sure they prepared for it. But the mind and the kind of posture of someone who could give the answer as bad as he gave. I mean, I don't know what he was trying to accomplish with that answer, but Vance didn't go after him, right? You imagine if Trump had been in that situation and his opponent had given an answer like that, he would have gone right after him. I thought a big part of what Vance showed tonight was he showed grace throughout, small moments and large. When he learned apparently on stage that Walz's son had witnessed a shooting, he said something about it.
Stand by, Mark. Let me play it, and you take it on the back end. SOT 16.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. And I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. So. Christ have mercy. It is awful.
Keep going.
So he I mean, there's so many things he did tonight that Donald Trump would never do. They're just not part of his DNA. That's one of them. But I just think, like Ross Duthler of the New York Times, who's a judgment I respect, who's a conservative but no lover of Trump, but does respect JD Vance, said it was the best Republican debate performance, in recent memory. I think moments like that, the fact that he was willing to say congenial things and graceful things and show grace to Tim Walz, I thought, again, strengthened his appearance. And again, all the things he did tonight that were strong go right back to why he was chosen in the first place. A much derided pick, in part because the media has gone after him. What did he do? He put a suburban dad face on MAGA. He spoke MAGA in a way that centrist voters could appreciate. He wasn't cruel. Now, the Democrats will say he's a liar, he's a phony, etc. But he's a really popular guy with a lot of people who know him, and you saw that tonight. He was the version of himself that people who like him, and I know a ton of people who like him and respect him. I also know people who think he's a phony, but he was his best self tonight in every way.
But to win a debate. To your point, I will say that I feel like those of us who knew JD Vance prior to him getting picked, like had spent some time with him, were in favor of this pick. And people who didn't know him weren't, because they were solely looking at it through the eyes of, get Nikki Haley so we can get that wing of the party behind Trump.
Right. Yep.
But those of us who knew JD Vance knew fully this side of him more than the public-facing side, and knew that this would come out, knew that he was actually very bright and like a very gifted mind. Think of how this kid had zero advantages, and basically, after having served in the Marines, got himself through Ohio State in 2 years with a double major. And then on to Yale. I mean, you could see how brilliant this guy was last night. And think of what it takes to overcome the childhood adverse experiences he had, completely by your own bootstraps, absolutely no connections, to get yourself up to that. Like, that's what we saw tonight. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.